I think just recently Fox News got called out for attempting to Photoshop Trump out of a picture, out of a out of a picture. I can't say pic. You can't say
Picture.
a picture with Epstein. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the Co-Conspirators podcast. As with every episode, joining me this week, my co-hosts Luke.
Hi, everyone.
And John.
Hello there.
This past week, conspiracy theories have been back in the headlines with the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, a long-time associate of Jeffrey Epstein, with the potential to shed new light on the shady underworld of high-profile celebrities and sex trafficking. Before we dig into the allegations against Maxwell, it's worth covering some of the key points surrounding Epstein's criminal case, the company he liked to associate with, and why his apparent suicide was, and still is, such a smoking gun. So, who was Jeffrey Epstein, and why was he so important?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, he's kind of one of those kind of mysterious figures who's associated with the elite. I think the allegations are that he ran an elite sort of paedophile ring and offering up underage people to those high in society. I think he had like a private island and things that became quite famous in the last few years, and an aircraft where people would take flights and get up to who knows what nefarious activity. So yeah, he's quite infamous now, is probably the word.
Yeah, nefarious activity is definitely a very apt way of describing it.
Yeah.
So on Wikipedia, Epstein is listed as an American financier, socialite, and convicted sex offender.
I think his finance career was dodgy as hell as well.
Yeah, as well, to touch on that very briefly, going into his history. So he started out as a maths teacher in the 70s, before quickly transitioning into investment banking, founding his own company called J. Epstein & Co. in 1982. He specifically marketed his services to those with assets worth more than $1 billion and operated his company out of the US Virgin Islands for tax reasons. At the time of his death, Epstein was supposedly worth $577,672,654, according to a will signed just 2 days before he was found dead in his cell.
Gonna say that was very precise.
Yeah, straight off Wikipedia, that one.
One thing about him being a maths teacher as well is, so in America, like a lot of countries, you need a university level degree to become a teacher. And he dropped out of university and just completely lied in his CV to become a teacher. And then when he got found out, he got kicked out and then lied in his CV to get into finance.
I say, talk about landing on your feet, though, if you just fallen straight into investment banking.
Yeah.
He was able to go and start his own, he was managing hedge funds and stuff for very wealthy individuals, but many of which have remained nameless, and the only actual known client of his was the owner of Victoria's Secret, Leslie Wexner. So he
had a few secrets.
Oh, definitely. Epstein was also known to attend these Victoria's Secret fashion shows and hosted the model to his New York City home. And he also helped apparently to get models to work with the company. So who knows what other dealings are going on behind the scenes there.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of his victims said, was that they came round to Epstein and he told them that, look, I'll get you a job at Victoria's Secret if you do this for me. And that's kind of how he groomed them.
Sounds very plausible. Things like preyed on girls with no fathers, things like easily impressionable. They think they're getting a great deal. They just have to do one dodgy gig, so to say, to put it into the simple terms.
I mean, yeah, everyone wants to. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people will do anything to become a model, self included, Calum.
Oh, yes, what I'd give that. So they say it's an easy life, but once your looks fade, you're tossed away to the side, and that's it. Epstein used his wealth to set up the Jeffrey Epstein VI Fund, which made donations to scientific research, most notably $30 million to Harvard University in 2003, which aimed to establish a mathematical, biological, and evolutionary dynamics program. So it's reported that Epstein was also interested in the science behind eugenics. It reports that he had ambitions to impregnate multiple women, thereby spreading his DNA, with his ranch in New Mexico serving as a base for this operation. So he's obviously slightly outing himself there as having some rather interesting scientific aims, I suppose you could say. Not sure how deep this goes, whether it's like the same degree of eugenics as, say, maybe Hitler, as we discussed on our last podcast.
I was going to say, it's a bit of a crossover.
Yeah, so all sorts of links we find in the conspiracy world. So if you haven't seen this already, do check out our previous World War II conspiracies. It's a great episode. But so back to Epstein again. So these donations working with his trust allowed him to elevate his rank within social circles, maneuvering himself into a position of influence, and allowed him to rub shoulders with very high-profile individuals, including the Clintons and the Trumps, amongst others, details of which are contained within his infamous Little Black Book, which serves as a wealth of information about his operation that we will likely reference throughout this podcast. Once the allegations and later charges against Epstein began to stick, the aforementioned names attempted to distance themselves from the financier, with limited success given that multiple photos and documented evidence of their apparent close relationships. I think just recently, Fox News got called out for trying to Photoshop Trump out of a picture with Epstein, but they made the mistake of leaving Melania in there with him, so it's basically almost certain that Trump would be there alongside him as well.
I mean, that's basic.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2000, Trump has quoted saying very positive things about Epstein. They said, "Oh no, going completely back on them," when asked about him recently. Obviously, same with the Clintons and Prince
They got
Andrew.
no choice, have they now?
Exactly.
You can't come out and back him.
Oh, I know. It just does not look good.
I think as well, when Ghislaine Maxwell first moved to America, she was close friends with Ivana Trump.
Yeah, some of the things that Trump's actually said about the parties that Epstein hosted. So things like saying lots of young girls, like models, or he had an interest in young girls. It's just, given what we know now, it's very incriminating for both him and the recently deceased Jeffrey. So this financial success you mentioned will allow him to purchase several properties across the globe in, say, Paris, London, New York, for example, as well as the entire island of Little St. James in the US Virgin Islands, which become his base of operations. So another vital part of this operation was his private jet, which was given the nickname the Lolita Express and was used to ferry various individuals across the world, including to his private island. I don't know who was behind that name, but that just gives implications of very dodgy dealings as well. It's not a good name for a plane, I'll say that much.
It's named after some weird book or something that's like a bit of a dodgy book.
Well, that's not sort of almost flaunting his intentions.
Oh, yeah, here we go, yeah. Lolita was a 1955 novel where the narrator obsesses over a 12-year-old girl and becomes sexually involved with her. So, yeah, I mean, talk about a smoking gun.
I mean, if he's named that himself, he's very brash. You'll say that much.
Yeah.
Given someone who seems to be so meticulous in his planning and having all these names and all of his contacts, just in case things were to go wrong, so you can incriminate a lot of people. But just calling your own private jet.
Respect the author of that book for is a good idea.
I know, yeah.
I suppose it's just under the guise it's art, it's not real life. But I mean, you've got to be thinking some dodgy thoughts to come up with that story. That's for sure.
Exactly.
So say this plane was used to ferry various individuals across the world, including to his private island, and accompanying these individuals were numerous girls, some of whom were underage, and believed to have been used for sex parties for Epstein and his guests' amusement. So as I mentioned earlier, that the flight log for this plane incriminates many prominent figures in the celebrity world, as well as the aforementioned Ghislaine Maxwell. However, at the time, these connections would prove valuable for Epstein, allowing him to, say, quote-unquote, get off lightly following an FBI tip-off in 2005 for sort of charges of solicitation of prostitution and procurement of minors for prostitution. But his friendship with the then US attorney Alex Acosta meant that Epstein only served 13 months and was reportedly free to leave jail 6 days a week to work. In other words, basically got off scot-free.
6 days a week? That is mental.
So he's going to jail 1 day out of 7. That's ridiculous.
What is the point?
I know.
I guess because it always had some jail time. Maybe it wasn't officially released to the public initially that his agreement would be that lax.
It's like a commonly done thing. I've literally never heard
No,
of
there's no way it is.
Like, is there people who spend like 5 days a week in prison and 2 days?
No, I've never heard of that either.
I mean, that would have blown my mind if it turned out that people do.
Yeah.
You know, oh, you're going down for 3 years, 4 days in, 3 days.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, you're on the 9 to 5 shift.
Nice bunk. So I imagine there might be if he's able to wrangle that agreement thanks to his connections. I mean, think other higher ups of high-profile individuals who would be at serious risk in prison might be able to try and get a more favourable arrangement.
Well, you need to not be a flight risk, and you need to not be deemed harmful, wouldn't you, to have that?
Yeah, so I'd say hold that thought about flight risk and not harmful.
Ooh.
Because as I say, cracks in Epstein's public image began to emerge soon after, when in 2008 he became a registered sex offender. However, the major breakthrough would come around a decade later when details of his sex trafficking organisation would emerge in November 2018. Investigations revealed that up to 80 girls were identified as having been involved in a quote-unquote sexual pyramid scheme, having been trafficked and abused by Epstein and his associates. Following this, on the 6th of July 2019, Epstein would be arrested, charged with sex trafficking and conspiracy.
You spoke about the pyramid scheme. Are you going to touch on that? 'Cause it's something I've heard about briefly. That basically,
Is it kind of like a
so
hierarchy?
basically, it was something like he'd pay you $100 to give him a massage, but then he'd give you $200 if you recruited another girl for him. So, and he's doing it to like school
Oh,
kids.
yeah,
So
yes.
there were schools where apparently every single like girl there knew of Epstein and had been recruited or at least approached to go. So it was mad. He had like thousands of people, I think.
Yeah, I think you basically summed it up there pretty much. Which, yeah, it is just so nefarious.
He was having three massages a day or something? Every
Yeah,
day.
that sounds about right.
Who needs that many
Well,
massages?
massage and then whatever comes after that.
In quotes, yeah.
I mean, he did say he wanted to impregnate multiple women with his DNA, so he's clearly got that sort of business on his mind a lot.
I feel like people who get into like that much money just feel like they're God's gift to this earth, need to give back. It's
You know, just to
ridiculous.
develop some sort of God complex, especially when you know all of these influential individuals, and
Well,
you
that's the
could basically
thing.
make or break their careers with just the drop of a bit of information, slip something out.
You suddenly become untouchable because, well, as we'll touch on later, but as soon as you've got all these links, if someone tries to bring you down, you just bring everyone down with you. So
It's not.
you feel invincible.
Yeah, it's not just say celebrities are actors, sports stars. It's governing bodies and royal families. We'll find out later. So, in the indictment for his arrest, prosecutors allege that Epstein molested girls as young as 14 in a sex trafficking operation that ran from at least 2002 to 2005. Epstein pleaded not guilty, but as more details came to light, he was declared a flight risk, as well as a danger to himself and others, rendering any bail package insufficient to overcome the danger to the community, should he be released. So finally, this will all culminate with news on the 10th of August 2019 that Epstein was found dead in his cell, an outcome that will be later ruled as suicide following an autopsy. Given the events and timing surrounding the announcement, this verdict is hotly contested and has spawned several conspiracies that John will detail later in the episode. But before we get there, I'll introduce Luke, who's going to cover the most recent news regarding Epstein's criminal empire with the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yep, so thanks for that, Calum. So I'm going to be looking a bit into Ghislaine Maxwell. And just a quick disclaimer before I start. This is a very brief overview of a deep, dark and serious issue. I will not have time to include all the nitty-gritty details and all the evidence stacked massively against Maxwell. That would take hours. So anyway, let's jump in. After Epstein's suspicious death, there was only one person left holding the keys to all his and his network's secrets, his associate and aptly named main girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. Also, she went by the name as G, just simply G for some reason, during the recent years in semi-hiding in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. In July 2020, obviously, Maxwell was arrested by the FBI for 6 federal crimes, including enticement of minors and sex trafficking, and she was arrested in Bradford, New Hampshire. Now, Bradford is a relatively modest town of 1,600 people, with nothing much notable about it. An odd choice of hiding for British millionaire Maxwell. Rather oddly, in what is going to be a Co-Conspirators exclusive for you, I did actually pass that town in 2018 as I was living in New Hampshire at the time. However, I did not see my fellow Brit Ghislaine. Not at the time I'd have any clue what she looks like.
We'd noticed nothing remarkable about the place.
So it's got a nice bridge, that's about it. It's just a generic American town, New England town. There's nothing else to it.
I suppose it makes sense as a hiding place. Once try and go under the radar.
Yeah, I mean, it is a rather good and unexpected hiding place. It's probably the last place you'd expect her to be. Well, not the last place. I'm sure like a cave in Pakistan might be a bit further up there. But it is a town that earns well below the state average income. So you would expect a super wealthy woman with a British accent to stand out like a sore thumb, but apparently not. So who actually is Ghislaine Maxwell? So Maxwell was born into quite an interesting family. She was born in France to the famous French Holocaust researcher Elizabeth Maynard and a Czech-born British media tycoon Robert Maxwell. She actually grew up in a 53-room mansion in Oxford, and she went on to attend Oxford University, where she would come into her own and mingle with some of the future leaders of British business and politics. It's actually here that she first met Prince Andrew. Calum will talk a bit about this later. Maxwell's father fell into disrepute, and much like Jeffrey Epstein and the nation of Switzerland, carried out numerous dodgy financial dealings. So you should check out our World War II episode if you want to hear more about the Swiss's dodgy dealings. Her father died from apparent suicide in 1991, and news broke out not long after that he had taken £440 million from his company's pension fund to artificially boost the company's share price. For more context, this is actually over £1 billion in today's money.
So it wasn't necessarily trying to hide it or slip it through the audit.
No idea how he got away with it for so long. I mean, it's £1 billion that's just been taken out of the pension fund. It's a bit crazy. I mean, it was never going to get put back there.
Because you can't really do much with a dead guy, though.
No. So it affected 32,000 pension holders, and they demanded the $440 million back from the Maxwell family. But not only did it not come, Ghislaine Maxwell angered the 32,000 as she quickly left the UK, where she was now being villainised, and she boarded the infamously expensive Concorde plane heading for New York, perhaps a sign of her arrogance and devious ways.
I'm assuming she had money at the time, though.
Yeah, so she didn't really work as such, but she had a £80,000 a year trust fund from her dad, so...
Very easy life then. Except for getting hounded for your father's misdoings.
Turns out she didn't really have an easy life in the end. She ended up being an organizer for probably one of the biggest crime syndicates of all time. Must have taken a lot of work to cover up, really.
Get to rub shoulders with the big names, though.
So yeah, as I mentioned, Maxwell didn't really work. She briefly worked in reporting, but is supposedly most known for being a socialite. She made a name for herself in the upper echelons of the London social scene after graduating from Oxford, and much of what she achieved in the UK she also took across the pond and applied in New York, becoming well respected and friendly with many influential figures, one of the first of whom was Ivana Trump, ex-wife of Donald.
So what did you study, Luke?
Because I'm not sure you can have a degree in just being social and hosting parties or whatever.
Yeah, so she studied Italian and French, which I guess could help her being a socialite. She can communicate, speaking multiple language, I'm sure, especially in New York where there's a lot of Italian Americans.
I suppose Epstein did also have a residence in Paris, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I believe he does.
Seems like a bit of a waste of an education, though, you think. Think of how difficult it is to get into Oxford.
Well, not when you got money.
I think when you grew up in a 53-room mansion in Oxford, I'd be pretty surprised, actually, if you didn't end up going to Oxford University. But yeah, as you can guess, being a socialite just basically entails being sociable and attending fancy parties. Given the extent of her network, you'd assume that she's one of the best socialites in the world. So I decided to check out an interview from Ghislaine to see her social skills myself. Ironically, she was actually stumbling more than you'll hear Calum stumbling in the cold opening of this episode.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
So yeah, the interview I watched was for her charity, which is called the Terramar Project, which I guess could just be a front to show herself off as a wonderful, charitable, caring person, when in reality she couldn't be more the opposite. The charity actually sold portions of the ocean for some reason. I'm pretty sure she doesn't own the ocean, so pretty sure how she was doing this. But then again, I think you can buy like land on the moon. I'm not really sure who sells that, but I remember that's kind of like a fun birthday present.
Yeah, you don't actually own it.
It's just like, it's like a digital moon or something.
Yeah, you have no legal right to it. It's just like a certificate thing. I think a lot of people who buy them do think they have it.
Well, you're not going to stake a claim on it.
Yeah, you can do that. You go to your coordinates and just set up shop.
Imagine you go to your coordinates and there's a Nazi alien.
Imagine moving to the moon on your land and you don't get on with your neighbours.
I just really do wonder who has the rights to sell that kind of thing. Because, I mean, I don't know about in America, but selling parts of the moon and people buying it as a birthday present is actually quite a big thing. It's quite commonly done.
So it's also like the next step up from these things where you can become a lord of your own square foot plot of land in like the Scottish Highlands or something.
Yeah, but to be fair, that one actually is legitimate because it's a property that a title comes with it. And so you just buy a tiny portion of that property. So in fairness, the lordship ones are real. You are legally a lord, but sadly the moon and even like Pluto ones aren't.
Yeah, I guess the owner of the estate has the right to sell that land as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But respect the genius who decided to sell bits of Pluto.
Yeah, no. We might do it as merch.
Yeah. Or even the ocean, though. You can't really, set out and actually visit your bit of ocean unless you've got very accurate coordinates with a boat. And when
just get all the fish out.
Yeah, what can you do? Terraform your bit of ocean.
Do a pencil dive straight down.
So yeah, back to the charity. Charity had abnormally high legal and accounting fees, which probably suggests it was involved in some kind of money laundering. It is well known that a lot of money launderers do it through charities, as charities are often seen as untouchable to criticism.
Tax havens as well.
Yeah, you can kind of imagine that if I was to just accuse a charity of some dodgy dealings, like people would be on my back without really looking too much into the nitty-gritty details of it, just because it's a charity and people always assume, it's great. Sometimes that isn't always the case.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah, I remember there was a story about a lot of Oxfam workers abusing people after the Haiti earthquake, stuff like that. So,
and their CEO is like incredibly well paid.
As well, the charity was through Epstein's estate, so there's that too. And I think it's quite well known now that Epstein had some dodgy dealings, so wouldn't really be surprised if there was some kind of money laundering going on. But yeah, Maxwell and Epstein first met after Ghislaine moved to New York in the early 90s at one of the many parties the socialite would attend. Epstein and Maxwell quickly formed a close bond that would span over the following decades. Maxwell has been labelled as Epstein's main girlfriend, aggressive assistant, and even best friend. I mean, it's a pretty deep friend zone when you're organising one of the world's most disgusting and lucrative trafficking rings. Even Calum hasn't been in that deep yet.
Wow, throwing me under the bus there.
But she was supposedly crazily in love with Epstein. I refer you to the famous Meatloaf song where he sings, "I would do anything for love, but I won't do that." In most people's cases, you'd like to hope trafficking hundreds of girls for your lover would be that in the song. And Maxwell was described by many as organising much of Epstein's life. And although Epstein was clearly a very smart man, Maxwell is incredibly intelligent and would be a huge asset in helping build the network and organising girls for Epstein and emotionally manipulating them so word would never come out. In addition, her disgraced father had managed to steal millions of pounds unnoticed for years from people's pensions, so you could argue the cold, ruthless streak was in the blood.
Do you know if he got a big inheritance after his passing?
You said 80 grand a year trust fund.
Yeah, the £80,000 a year trust fund was coming from Liechtenstein as well. So, I mean, I don't actually know if the £440 million ever got claimed back off the Maxwell estate, but obviously the one at Liechtenstein was always safe.
I mean, you probably make only a lot more there, but 80,000 a year when you're a big socialite can't be that much.
Well, socialites get everything for free, don't they? They just show up, really.
It's in the 90s as well, and I think it would probably be worth about £200,000 a year in today's money.
Oh, I mean, something like that.
And on top of that, obviously, she met Epstein pretty quickly after moving to New York and ended up living at his mansion. And I mean, he provided her a lot of finance as well.
That's to be expected, I guess, when she's organising his whole life for him.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so as Calum will discuss in more detail, she was tied to the British royal family through Andrew and even attended a party at the Queen's Sandringham house with Epstein, which was described by Andrew as nothing more than a straightforward shooting weekend. Maxwell's network is extensive and relatively secretive. She was a big part of the recruitment drive in both the victims and the aggressors. She has been pictured with the disgraced Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein, as well as controversial presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. So already you can really see the network's power, and many victims described her as a comforting presence, and she tried to normalize the proceedings and what they should do. Many said it was due to her they went through with it, as she made them feel special. Once she had manipulated them, she also used them to recruit others for the cause.
I think that's probably one of the most damning allegations against her, that she was involved in actually procuring the girls, given that she's a woman as well. And you think putting them into vulnerable positions just suggests like complete lack of empathy.
She was really the one who convinced them to do it. And I know there was money involved as well, but there's also the emotional side to it. So she convinced them on that front.
Yeah, especially by apparently seeming trustworthy.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of girls would have looked up to her. And given that she's, quite a well-spoken woman, if she said it was okay and the right thing to do, it might have swayed them.
Well, it certainly did in all the cases that we've seen.
And yeah, Maxwell is accused of being in this role from the early 90s and recruiting girls as young as 13. Maxwell denies being involved in any of this. One such case alleged that Maxwell hired her to give massages to Epstein and then later threatened to physically harm her or destroy her career prospects if she did not comply with their sexual demands at his mansion in New York and on his private Caribbean island. Many of the girls involved were promised a shot at modelling or a role in other areas of Epstein's portfolio. So you can see there was quite a lot of manipulation here. People thought, they'd get an upper hand if they were to just, give a little massage. Maxwell also had the power to damage careers and cause physical and more mental harm, with constant stalking and surveying of people who threatened to talk out. One victim spoke of moving a dress secretively multiple times, but yet still received mail to her house from Maxwell, letting her know she was still watching. I feel like the problem here is the first to speak out would just be met with one of the most powerful set of lawyers in the world, and also to be threatened with their life, and hence that's probably why the network was kind of able to go under the radar for decades.
I saw recently, very, very recently actually, reports that suggested that many figures knew what was going on with Maxwell, just didn't say anything, or public figures had been attended parties with her and could sort of censor dodgy dealings going on, if we call it that.
Yeah, you always wonder with these things when there's like the recruitment drive. Like, for example, Maxwell was friends with Andrew, and if the allegations are true, she got him involved. It's just, how does that conversation happen, really? And then obviously, surely there's got to be at least one person that she asked, and they're just like, what the fuck?
If it was someone wanted to speak out, be someone's word against someone else's, and like two sets of really powerful lawyers going up against it. But it's a typical sort of response when people say after the event, they say, "Oh, we knew this was going on. Always knew how bad she was, or she was dodgy," but obviously not saying anything at the time.
Yeah, and just totally ignore it.
Just like not want to get their hands dirty.
And there was one point where Maxwell actually even filed a lawsuit against Epstein's estate after his death to pay for her legal fees. Whether this was a desperate attempt to get more cash or some kind of ploy to show herself as innocent because, she was suing Epstein in some way can be debated. What is always suspicious about Maxwell is, despite proclaiming her innocence, she has a history of dodging lawsuits she is involved in. In one lawsuit, she was due to give a deposition, but missed it as she flew back to the UK to look after her ill mother, with no intention of returning to the States in the short term. However, despite not intending to return, within a month she was back and attending Chelsea Clinton's wedding. One thing that I find really weird about this is the fact that she's invited to such events begs the question as to whether these people were actually innocent. I should assume that if Bill Clinton actually knew who she really was, he wouldn't want her pictured at a family event. But maybe they were just so arrogant and blindsided they just thought they would always get away with it.
Yeah, they probably thought it was never going to come out. And probably everyone in the room knew of her and knew what she was like. So they knew it wasn't really a risk getting her along.
It's probably managed to maintain the sort of the public facade of being just a socialite who's at every event. So you think, just there's Ghislaine Maxwell. Basically also expected to be at these things given her social standing.
I don't know how famous she actually was though, because obviously socialites are normally very famous. I hadn't personally heard of her before all this, but I don't know if other people had or what. I'm not sure.
What's an example of a famous socialite?
People like Tamara Eccleston and Paris Hilton.
I guess it's because they have controversy and Maxwell kind of managed to escape any controversy, really.
It's just sort of bottling it all up till it explodes in a massive shitstorm.
I mean, I'm assuming she was known in, the upper circles, considering some of the friends she had and who she was pictured with too.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of this barely scratches the surface. More and more people are speaking up about Epstein, and more often than not, Maxwell is indicted as the recruiter and organizer. This is really hardly a conspiracy, given she has now been charged by the FBI, but the depths and scale of this are still unknown to many. There is even an e-fit of a potential suspect in the Madeleine McCann case, who looks suspiciously like Maxwell. If by some miracle Maxwell was involved in the Madeleine McCann case in Portugal, probably could argue it would be the biggest trafficking ring the world has ever seen.
That would be the ultimate conspiracy theory as well. I think. Like finding two huge conspiracy worlds, meshing them together.
I genuinely think the world would blow up if that was true.
Coronavirus would be instantly forgotten about.
It's already kind of forgotten about in America right now, anyway. So yeah, to bring it a bit more to a conspiracy side, there are whispers going around that Maxwell has been cooperating with the FBI for 6 months now, living in witness protection in Brantford, New Hampshire, and has been getting confessions over the phone from many people in the network. If this were to be true, the repercussions would be incredible. However, many people in the upper echelons of the American system would obviously not want this to come out and probably have the power to stop it, especially if you believe that Donald Trump himself is going to be caught up in all of this.
I saw something, again, interesting after the fact that I did my actual Prince Andrew theory the other day, so I'll record this in non-chronological order. But I saw a very interesting interview with someone who claims to be a close friend of Maxwell, saying that there is no way she would, say, dob Andrew in because they were so close. So if that's the case...
I think John mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? Only time will tell with that one. She might not, if she ever makes it to trial.
Yeah, I mean, someone claims to be a friend trying to get their 5 minutes in the spotlight, but she was very convinced that there's no way Maxwell would ever fill the beans with Prince Andrew.
I do wonder on that. I mean, Maxwell clearly doesn't really have any ethics and doesn't really show any remorse and acted selfishly on behalf of herself and Epstein for years and probably wouldn't put it past her to comply to benefit herself and get a shorter sentence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But you never know, she might. If the things we're led to believe by conspiracy theorists about the royal family are true, she might think it's not really worth the risk dobbing him in, even if it means she gets out of prison time, because then she's going to have a target on her back from the royals, so she might think it's not worth it.
I mean, who else do we think, who was it who was responsible for getting Epstein in his cell?
Well, we'll come on to that, Calum.
Excellent.
So given the stacks of evidence against her, the only arguments in Maxwell's defense would probably be she was emotionally manipulated by Epstein to carry out what she did. I think this is weak. Maxwell played a part in ruining hundreds of girls' lives by using her intelligence, influence and power. And whilst I hope that she can dob in others involved in this crime, I also hope from doing this, her sentence is just reduced from 10 life sentences to 1 with no parole.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way she'd be getting out anytime soon if everything goes to plan.
No, you'd think if they were going to give her a shorter sentence, it still has to be something ridiculous.
Even if she basically gave every single name in the ring.
6ix9ine style.
Yeah, exactly. Basically snitched on everyone.
Why do you think Ghislaine's been arrested? We know 6ix9ine talks.
6ix9ine snitched on Calum. She did bribe New Hampshire.
Well-known socialite as well, 6ix9ine, often seen at parties with the Trumps and the Clintons.
That's a picture. Just to end on a bit of thought, for decades, a trafficking ring was won by one rich, evil man and his intelligent, manipulative partner. This ring could implicate some of the most powerful individuals in the world, from the President of America to the Duke of York. This really shows us things do go on undercover. This is an incident of one that has potentially been uncovered, but many probably don't. We really don't know everything that is happening in the world, but of course, the Co-Conspirators podcast will continue to keep you updated.
You can count on us for impartial, unbiased information, reporting the facts, with also some conspiracy thrown in.
Yeah, so I guess for this one, it's really hard to give a believability score, as I've kind of just talked about the case itself. So I'm going to ask for your thoughts on how much involvement Maxwell actually had, whether she was the leader of it or whether and also what you do think about the conspiracy that she has been cooperating with the FBI, how believable you think that is.
Yeah, thanks for that, Luke. I think it's a really good theory, obviously. I think that the whole thing overall with Epstein is interesting to a hell of a lot of people. So I think it's almost beyond doubt that he couldn't have done it a lot on his own. And I think Ghislaine was used, obviously, as a woman in the kind of recruitment process. Don't really want to oversimplify it, but kind of on like relating to them and kind of suckering them in, if you will. But she'd be more effective at that than like a middle-aged man would be. So
Yeah, for sure.
I think, yeah, definitely she had some involvement. The overall conspiracy of her kind of being a right-hand woman to Epstein, I think it's obviously a fantastic conspiracy theory, you know. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. In terms of believability as overall, I think it's going to be high again because, you know, she's been arrested for it. And these are all these like victims all coming out saying, yeah, she was involved, she recruited me or whatever. It almost seems very difficult to give it much lower than like a 9.5 out of 10 on her being involved. And obviously having like a really dodgy dad and all these dodgy finance dealings with charities and things like that. And as Calum kind of touched on, I suppose it only being on 80, allegedly only having like 80 grand a year doesn't seem a massive amount to live such a lavish lifestyle. So yeah, I think certainly very believable. In terms of her cooperating with the FBI, it's quite a difficult one really, because on the one hand it would benefit her in the short term because it could mean she gets a shorter sentence or a more comfortable sentence. But then again, is she just going to have like loads of enemies when she comes out and maybe it's not worth her trouble? So I think on the fact that she'll cooperate, I'd like to think that she will, and she'll unearth a lot of the names and a lot of the inner workings because obviously Epstein never got the chance to. So I think I'm going to give that part of it a 7 for believability.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just in disbelief that she was, you know, able to live in New Hampshire in a town for so long without being found. You'd assume that the FBI would, with all their power and their ability, would be able to find her quickly enough.
At the same time, it does seem like a useful place, small American town, 1,000 odd population, perfect for a witness protection program or something like that.
If you're thinking of witness protection, that's exactly the type of place you'd think.
Yeah, but just then to say she's in this said witness protection, then to go through the big public show of arrest and everything like that, seems like they've all got all the names they need to build the case.
It would be interesting to see. I guess time will tell if she's dobbed anyone in, because you'll be hearing arrests left, right, and centre, I guess.
Well, it could have been done as a backlash to Epstein, you know. People kind of want blood, they want it to be spilt, and maybe initially they would just wanted her to cooperate and not arrest her, just kind of cooperate behind the scenes. And then when there was such unprecedented uproar about the Epstein case, maybe they thought, oh, we're going to have to bring somebody else in to try and push the Epstein part to one side.
Yeah, so as believability goes, I think it's very likely that she's going to talk, given she's previously displayed such a malice and cruel side to her. Very much probably would be interested in self-preservation rather than like letting her pride not to dob anyone in, because she really does say have, well, not saying nothing to lose, everything to gain. But I'm sure she'll be talking. If there's even a small chance to reduce a sentence or get her slightly more comfortable, not quite Epstein, you're leaving prison 6 days a week to work sort of arrangements.
That is ridiculous.
I know, I can believe that.
So the believability for her snitching, essentially, like I say, it's a 9 out of 10. I can't really see much thing going against that. It's in her best interest to do what they want, I think. Maybe not in witness protection. I think that may be a little bit more far-fetched, but the fact she's actually talking is very high believability. So but 2 go purely on the witness protection argument that she was found in New Hampshire because she was under witness protection, maybe 6.5 out of 10, I think. It's plausible, given how sort of maybe like fish out of water scenario for someone with so much money and influence to be in a small backwater town in America. But you never know with these things, I guess. I suppose as a conspiracy overall as a whole, it's just 9.5, I think, out of 10. It's such a big one, given it has potential to implicate so many high-profile names. Like Epstein's Black Book and his activities, operation alluded to. Like Maxwell could be like the final nail in the coffin for so many of these individuals.
Yeah, I think as well, to give my own ratings. We seem to say this every week, but it's definitely one of the biggest conspiracies of all time, without doubt. Just the surroundings of how Epstein ended up dying in prison that John will touch on. And then obviously Maxwell's involvement, and she's kind of the last person. And it'll be interesting to see now what happens with her in prison. And also interesting to see in the coming months and years if anyone does get dobbed in. And just so many powerful people involved. So I'm also going to give it a 9 out of 10 as a conspiracy. In terms of believability, I think the fact that she was involved in some way, it's a 10 out of 10. All the evidence stacked against her and all these victims speaking up, it's almost definite in my opinion that she's involved. I kind of agree with Calum. I think she has no ethics and no remorse and should do anything to kind of benefit herself. So I'd be surprised if she wasn't willing to chuck a few names in, get some witness protection somewhere and live the rest of her life comfortably, and obviously a shorter sentence. So I'm actually going to give that an 8 out of 10 for believability. So that kind of rounds up my part of the Epstein-Maxwell conspiracy. Callum's going to talk a bit more on Prince Andrew, I think. So let's get into that, Calum.
Yeah, right, thanks for that, Luke. Right, so back to me then. Safe to say that with the recent arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, it would definitely have gotten Prince Andrew sweating. Unless he really was telling the truth in his infamous BBC interview, and he actually has a medical condition rendering him unable to sweat, given Maxwell's role within Epstein's operation, procuring girls and making connections. As the second son of Queen Elizabeth II, palace insiders have suggested that Prince Andrew was her favourite, and he always maintained his position as a prominent member of the British monarchy, holding the title of Duke of York. So prior to the allegations against him, Prince Andrew was generally well respected thanks to his military service, having flown helicopter missions during the Falklands War, and also his notable charitable work. Also, from 2001 to 2011, Andrew held the position as the United Kingdom's Special Representative for International Trade and Investment, which involved representing and promoting the UK at various trade fairs and conferences around the world. So towards the end of his tenure as this special representative for trade, the prince began to receive criticism for his friendship with Epstein, which came to light when his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson revealed that Andrew had helped arrange a deal that would see Epstein pay off some of her debts. This, along with pictures of Epstein and Andrew in Central Park, New York, would cause Andrew to lose his trade position, prompting Andrew to come out in the press and state he'd cut all ties with the financier and socialite. In 2014, Andrew is one of several prominent figures named in a lawsuit alleging that the group had engaged with sexual activities with a minor, later revealed to be with Virginia Roberts, who claimed she'd been trafficked by Epstein. The royal family faced demands to cut ties with Andrew, who had reportedly refused to respond to any allegations against him under oath, yet Buckingham Palace repeatedly and categorically denied any claims against the prince. So more evidence emerged regarding Virginia Roberts' case against Andrew, who recounted 3 instances of sexual relations with the prince in London, New York, and Epstein's private island in the US Virgin Islands, which all occurred when she was 17 and therefore still technically a minor. Roberts claims that she was paid $15,000 for the meeting in London.
Wouldn't be illegal in the UK, though, would it?
I suppose no, not technically illegal given that the age of consent is 16, but I suppose by the laws she's still not an adult, so it's...
In many
I mean, it's dodgy.
The age of consent is...
Well, I suppose it's a bit of a moral grey area.
And plus, yeah, this is only one case. I suppose you don't know what, if anything else has happened. Hang around with Epstein, you could make that leap probably quite easily.
Yeah, exactly. So I mentioned earlier, he's had reports that girls as young as 14 were abused.
Yeah.
Part of his organisation. But it's just one of those things that whenever these cases of potential paedophilia or just sex with people who are much younger, you think there's got to be something going off in the back of your mind, no matter how famous and well connected you are, thinking this doesn't really feel right or this isn't right. But
I mean, they obviously know, don't they? It's not right, but...
Yeah.
If you're thinking, it comes back to being untouchable or thinking you're untouchable.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he's proven he's untouchable, really.
Well, yeah, even now, because he still denies it now. Remains to be seen what happens with Ghislaine Maxwell, but, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if nothing ever comes of Andrew and he's never arrested or found guilty of anything.
Yeah, so even recently there have been multiple news reports saying he's not exactly being cooperative with any investigations, despite saying he would aid and offer any information. But he hasn't gone to court or given statements under oath. I think he's just hoping as soon as he gets brushed under the carpet, the better. But we're now with Maxwell's arrest and the potential for her to talk. I think it could all come out in the next few months.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
But yeah, so back to the Ethereum. Say flight records confirm that both Andrew and Roberts were in the aforementioned locations at the time of the claim, and photographic evidence also emerged depicting Prince Andrew with his arm around Roberts, which also featured Ghislaine Maxwell in the background. So it's safe to say that the court of public opinion has definitely made up their mind, given the events that were to follow. So following Epstein's arrest and subsequent death, Prince Andrew faced renewed scrutiny and criticism of his relationship with the socialite and financier, with their reported closeness and whatever other arrangements they had in place. This culminated with the infamous BBC Newsnight interview on the 14th of November, something I've actually covered as part of our Royal Family Conspiracies episode. So I'll say check that out.
Check it out if you haven't already.
Exactly, yeah, there's quite a lot of links to this one. Great minds think alike. Regardless, as I said probably in the last one, this interview was disastrous, full of allegations, bizarre statements, and outright falsehoods, so it's well worth revisiting some of the key talking points. So when asked about Jeffrey, Andrew said that the pair met in 1999 through Ghislaine Maxwell, stating that their friendship had offered him many useful opportunities and was not one that he regretted, which is definitely a poor choice of phrase, given everything that came to light in Epstein's sins.
I'm sure he's reiterated that since that interview as well. I'm sure he said similar things, like almost implying, oh, he wasn't that bad of a person and I wouldn't change my actions if I did it again, sort of thing. He certainly hasn't really showed any remorse, but I suppose you can't show any remorse if you don't own up to anything.
Exactly. I suppose you think if you might be trying to interpret the question as just talking strictly for business opportunities. But even then, you'd think someone, well, Andrew's is not stupid. You'd like to think.
No.
You think just given how badly PR has gone for you, you'd think, okay, right, I made a mistake. It was not something I would do having gone back. If I had a chance to go back, I would have tried to distance myself from him. But I suppose you think the connections he had and Andrew working within trade and stuff, some money that can potentially exchange hands.
Yeah, the UK got some really good trade deals with Victoria's Secrets in the end.
That's what I was thinking. When you say business deals, they're not really allowed to have a business, would he? Prince Andrew, so like.
I mean, realistically, yeah, there's no reason because Prince Andrew's not sticking his assets with Epstein, surely.
That would be too much of a smoking gun, I think.
But it's not like you could own a business anyway as a royal.
Doesn't Prince Charles have his trust?
I suppose you have trust. I think that's a non-profit. Because they get enough money from the Queen anyway as part of the whole royal setup.
But it would be immoral to then try and make your own money if you're already getting taxpayers' money funding you, wouldn't it? So
yeah, expenses and all sorts.
Yeah.
You try and think from a purely altruistic point of view. You might use Epstein for connections to then bring more trade to the UK. I don't know, but
I mean, who's he going to be connected with? The Chinese trade ambassador? Like,
you never know. Whatever that black book has to reveal, maybe just purely improve US-UK trade relations. But
yeah, to be fair, things like that wouldn't even surprise you that much.
No.
Now, given some of the stuff we've covered on this podcast, I think we're quite immune to surprise.
Yeah.
So, as part of their friendship, the prince also admitted to staying at Epstein's mansion for 3 days in New York. And this was actually after Epstein's conviction for sex offences against a minor, where Prince Andrew describes it as a convenient place to stay. However, he did sort of backtrack on his thinking behind this one. He did say such a decision was a mistake, and it was not very becoming of a royal, and he had, quote, let the side down.
So incredibly stupid, isn't it? When you're in the public eye, you can't go and stay at a guy's been charged for being a paedophile's house.
I know. If I say 3 days, well, this is one of the locations where so these parties Epstein hosted supposedly took place.
Even if for theoretical sake you were totally innocent, you'd surely think twice before staying at a guy's house like that.
You know it's just going to get out. You think, so you're a prince, he's a billionaire. Yeah. Paparazzi are all over the place. I think they managed to get a picture of him with Virginia Roberts, which I think he maintains was photoshopped or edited.
But I don't know how they got an image like that. Because you say paparazzi would be everywhere, right?
Oh, maybe not.
I would think it'd be the opposite. You're like flying over to an island or having a secret meeting with all these high-level people. you'd think no images would ever get out.
I guess
So I
maybe
don't
it's just
really
one of those
understand how they have.
If you meet up in Central Park in the middle of London, those photos are going to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but they're not the
I
ones
mean-
we're seeing, are they? They all seem to be at functions or in people's houses.
Yeah, there have been photos of them meeting outside, and there's the picture of Andrew recently meeting with lawyers who'd been associated with Epstein in the past.
But I suspect those photos were taken purely to get a photo of royalty, because I don't really know how well known he was up until the last couple of years, especially going back 15 years. I don't think people would have made the link and seen them two out. I don't think most people would have even known who he was. So the pictures were probably taken just to get a picture of a royal, and then now since resurfacing because of everything that's gone on.
I think by 2008, though, he had been in the news for his being described as a sex offender. So I think that was just quite incriminating. I think and just the fact, get the picture with the royal, always with this guy, that's even better.
Mm.
Yeah, but say as for the photos, maybe in the actual parties one with Andrew and Roberts, I think that's just such a stupid thing for the prince to agree to do, beyond the point of actually going to this party, engaging in relations with Roberts, and also have a photograph taken of you at the party.
But I suppose that almost can sway you the other way and can be used to say he's innocent, because you think if he was up to no good, he'd try and hide it. The fact he's going out meeting him, maybe he is innocent and didn't see any harm in doing it because he wasn't up to anything. He wasn't trying to hide anything. As unlikely as it may seem,
Yeah,
I think he could
potentially. Yeah, I suppose just
spin
to
it
say,
that way.
if it's just to maintain a strictly business relationship, but I think we know that's not really the case, or it's basically all indications point to it not being the case. So yeah, so basically talking of letting the side down, it's now time to address the most pressing charges against the prince. Naturally, Andrew denied all allegations made against him by Virginia Roberts, stating that he had never met the girl and had absolutely no memory of any photographs taken at Ghislaine Maxwell's residence. I think just back to the photographs one more time, I think it might be sort of a play by Epstein to have a little bit of extra blackmailing information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Direct photo evidence, because no disputing the fact that is Prince Andrew who's got his arm around, say, a 17-year-old girl. No matter what he claims it being edited. I'm not sure what the photo editing abilities were like in the early 2000s. I think he apparently had it sent off to be examined, but the results were inconclusive. But there's no way you're faking that to that degree.
No.
Photo editing brings back the whole Madeleine McCann case as well, so that's another podcast we've got to check out. I'm making all the links today.
Yeah. Linking back to the royals, there's a theory Prince Philip is a reincarnation of coronavirus, so go and check out our other episode.
There you go, get them all in there. Now I've just got to make a link between North Korea and also the moon landings.
You got a Diana episode?
There we go, yeah, Diana, North Korea. Some out there has made...
Oh, no, wait, yeah, there was a North Korea released a stamp of Diana and Charles's wedding.
Yeah.
There we go. There's always
full circle.
Right, so back to the most pressing allegation against Andrew. So he definitely doubled down on his position, describing any photographs of the pair, him and Roberts, being fake, claiming that he wasn't in London at the time the pictures were taken. So, where did Prince Andrew say that he was during the time of these allegations?
I don't know.
Woking.
Of course. Pizza Express, was it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Pizza Express in Woking, attending a party with his daughter Beatrice. I don't know who gave him the advice to say that he's going to be at a Pizza Express in Woking.
I know.
Or he came up with it of his own accord and thought, oh, this is brilliant, I'll never think to check this. Because if you think a prince and a princess, technically, attending a Pizza Express.
That's the thing, like, you can never imagine the royal family just going out to dinner at Pizza
No
Express.
way.
Yeah, and they're having a party at the Pizza Express.
Yeah.
So sure, you could say you're having a private function or something, or you're just at home.
Yeah. He should have said he was in Monaco, because I could have corroborated it, because I actually saw him when I was on holiday in Monaco. So I would have had his back in the courts.
Epstein on his boat as well, in the background.
Well, you never know, because I wouldn't have recognised him at the time, and he was in like a dark tinted windows car. And there were other people in there, so who knows? Could have been Ghislaine and Jeffrey in there with him.
Didn't notice any sort of girls being abducted off the streets as they were walking past.
I didn't know, but Carol Vorderman was there too. Do you want to incriminate her?
Oh, I wounn't be surprised. She's just something about her that doesn't seem quite right.
Yeah.
The Ghislaine Maxwell character.
Well, I don't want to be making any allegations that could be
They all
used.
studied at Cambridge and Oxford.
We know how much they like to be like sort of old girls clubs. Actually, they're close-knit, and also the royal family is known as the firm, so it could all be linked again. Andrew also attempted to defend himself against Robert's allegations. He got very sweaty while dancing with her at a London club, claiming that he had lost the physiological ability to sweat following an adrenaline overdose while serving in the Falklands.
Right. So does this not tie into the theory that the royal family are all lizards? He can't sweat, which means he must be cold-blooded, surely, because how's his body regulating?
Yeah.
I think he's also claimed that the Queen has a similar condition and doesn't sweat at all.
He's
God.
inadvertently released the news that the royal family are all lizards.
So either we're getting Prince Andrew is a liar and he does actually sweat, or the royal family are lizards. There's no in between.
Is that a legit medical condition that people don't sweat?
I mean, there will be one, yeah. I know there's one where
It
there's
seems
excessive
so
sweat.
unlikely.
Probably is definitely a case, but several doctors have refuted Andrew's statement specifically, saying that the general medical consensus is that an adrenaline overdose would actually lead to an increase in one's proclivity to
Yeah.
sweat.
Well, you'd think so. When you get like proper adrenaline rush, you do start sweating more, don't you?
It would activate certain areas of your body and prioritize those like survival instincts. Maybe would lead to relaxation of your sweat response.
Again, though, it's a strange thing to make up.
Yeah.
Why would he even talk about the sweating thing and try and give a rebuttal for that when there are far more pressing issues at hand?
I guess I think the sweat thing is also quite an intimate issue that Virginia Roberts has recounted. So he's got to try and deflect that somehow. I think that's one of the potentially the most incriminating things, given if they were close and she was dancing with him in the club as they have been pictured.
Mm.
And to say that the prince was very sweaty.
Well, have you seen the picture of him in the club? He is drenched in sweat.
Yeah, so those were pictures actually released after the interview. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's much denying that. Can you Photoshop sweat onto someone?
Probably.
There's also the one about the travelling clothes and saying that he wouldn't have worn just I think it was jeans and a shirt, or
Yeah.
like
Just a
him
white
being
shirt.
pictured multiple times wearing the same attire in similar situations. There's one thing to be taken from this, that the Prince Andrew is basically a compulsive liar, or maybe he should be just that misinformed. That sweating one is such a poor allegation, because it could be instantly checked by multiple medical professionals who all have their two pence to say on it.
Hmm.
And to try and go into the specifics as well, it's almost trying to give too much detail as part of your lie.
Yeah, I mean, when you're just trying to give a rebuttal for every little detail, which maybe isn't a natural thing you'd do.
Yeah, exactly. Another crossover with the cans, but I can't even stop making these links. So yeah, as I said earlier, this whole interview proved to be a PR nightmare for Prince Andrew, as well as the royal family as a whole. The interview was described in the press as a car crash, nuclear explosion level bad, and the worst public relations crisis for the royal family since Diana, which we also covered in our royal family podcast. So on the 20th of November, I think just 4 days after the interview aired, a statement from Buckingham Palace announced that Prince Andrew was suspending his public duties for the foreseeable future, which then progressed into permanent resignation later in 2020. On the 21st of November, the Duke relinquished his role as the Chancellor of the University of Huddersfield, and 3 days later, the Palace confirmed that Andrew was to step down from all 230 of his patronages. In June 2020, Andrew was named as a person of interest in a criminal investigation in the United States, and that the United States had filed a mutual legal assistance request to British authorities in order to question Andrew. Newsweek reported that the majority of British citizens believe Andrew should be stripped of his titles and extradited to the United States to answer for his alleged crimes. By this point, any allegations against Prince Andrew seem to be more facts than conspiracy, given the evidence against him. But they're still very important when regarding the wider picture with Epstein. Nevertheless, as we do for every segment on this podcast, I'd be interested to hear if you had any further thoughts, and of course ask you how believable you find this case, as well as giving it an overall rating.
Well, I think it's certainly one of the most famous cases in years. It's got everything, because it isn't, as much as this theory is focused on Andrew, the theory as a whole is wider than that, and that there could be such an elite level paedophile ring and serious involvement with people like Epstein having such power and such sway amongst some of the most powerful people on the planet. It's certainly a concern. I don't think you really get conspiracies much bigger than that, especially when it involves a royal.
Exactly. I think there could be countless other celebrities going through the exact same sort of state that Andrew's been taken through these past few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, wouldn't surprise me if Trump gets it at some point. I mean, it all depends on what Maxwell says or what happens, or if she even makes it to trial.
Yeah, as they get to her first in her cell. I don't want to jump the gun there for your theory.
But yeah, I'm going to give it a 9.5 for the conspiracy.
Very good.
Overall, I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that, does it? On the believability, I think for the sake of neutrality and almost being devil's advocate, even though it's saying the official side, I will say that there is a chance that he is innocent, because obviously he was pictured with a 17-year-old, and it could have been strictly business, even though I'm not really sure what those business meetings could have been. And either way, it was a very poor move. But I think that the evidence is pretty incriminating overall. It was clearly more than like a business relationship. This really seemed like quite a personal friendship between them. There's so many pictures and like the flights and staying over in relative places. And as Epstein went to the Buckingham Palace, didn't he? The pictures that come out today or yesterday, of him and Maxwell sitting on like a royal throne or something.
Oh, I hadn't actually seen that. Surprising. That's definitely an interesting revelation. Potentially could incriminate more royals if we're going to be looking really deeper into this. And I suppose this all could come out over the next few months.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think believability, I suppose I'll go just as Andrew specifically rather than the overall theories because they kind of overlap. But yeah, it's difficult. Like I say, it's quite incriminating. We know they had a personal friendship. We could see Andrew squirming in that interview, certainly has stuff to hide, and withdrawing him from royal duty is almost an admission of guilt without actually admitting it. So I think believability, I'm going to go. Well, that he was it's almost a two-part because you say one that he was heavily involved with Epstein just as a whole and knew him very well, and in that case it would have to be like a 10 for believability.
Go more for the actual allegations from Virginia Roberts that he was involved right at the most dirty of deeds with Epstein's organisation.
Well, I think with her again, there's photographic evidence, and you would think maybe if he's had certain relations with one, then it probably wouldn't have stopped at one. So I think believability, I'll go for even though it might seem quite low. For this theory, I'm still going to go for an 8 out of 10.
Oh, that's fair enough. I guess I have to wait till things get proven in court, if ever.
Probably never know.
They mentioned squirming in the interview. I imagine like forensic psychologists and body language experts have had an absolute field day with him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what about you, Luke? What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's really one of them where we seem to end up saying this quite often, but probably is one that is so far from being a conspiracy just because literally 95% of the British public believe Andrew is guilty in this case. And as well as that, given the power that Andrew obviously has, he'd probably be able to get away with it because realistically, as Prince Andrew, he's quite untouchable, and you'd probably argue that Donald Trump's the same because Donald Trump also seems very incriminated in all of this. Trump seems to get away with a lot as well.
It's just so brush it off. You can just brush things off him though. They say in an interview, fake news, and then they go and move on next question.
He's bulletproof.
I think as a conspiracy as a whole, it's got to be a very high one. It's got to be a 9.5, just the whole Epstein case, and then involving a name like Prince Andrew that could just completely tarnish the royal family as a whole. Because not only is it bad enough that Andrew's done what he's done, it's kind of even worse that the royal family has then seemingly attempted to cover it up and clear Andrew's name. And although he has obviously stepped down.
Yeah, they say I always had to backtrack. I think the point John made in the original Royal Family podcast, so almost like stripping of his titles immediately would be like an admission of guilt, but then having to backtrack on that.
Well, they didn't have a choice anyway, did they?
Yeah.
Because say, who's going to want Prince Andrew opening your school on royal duty after all this?
No, it's not.
There's not going to be much demand for it.
No.
And going on believability, it just seems that people in power just seem to get too power crazy and do ridiculous things. I mean, given that Epstein's list is so complete and there's so many people involved, it just begs the question, what the hell are these people really doing? Andrew's always seemed a bit shady, and if, Jeffrey Epstein came up to Andrew and said, look, I sort you out 10 beautiful women if you come over to my island, I'd almost put money on Andrew saying yes to that.
Yeah.
Something that John mentioned, which would kind of bring the believability down a bit, is just the sheer stupidity of it from Andrew to still involve himself with Epstein and be pictured with him and stay at his house after he's been, charged for being a paedophile.
Yeah.
That just seems so ludicrous and such a stupid thing to do that in some ways you'd only really do it if you were innocent.
Or he was just that arrogant and cocky and thought he was that untouchable.
Didn't think anything was going to come of it, I guess. But knowing what the media's like, I'll jump on any scraps, and this is more than scrap.
Yeah, I think Andrew's very arrogant, and I think he kind of agreed to do this BBC interview in the respect that he thought he was so intelligent that his string of lies were going to get him out of it, whereas it didn't really fool anyone. And I personally believe he's probably guilty in some way, shape, or form. So I'm actually going to give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, that's what the point I think he's getting one over the public. I mean, you have to be a special kind of stupid to believe everything that he says, given how much criticism he's received off the back of that interview. You have to be seriously going against the narrative, so to speak. But when it's that incriminating,
I can just imagine that before the interview, he literally doused himself in 20 cans of antiperspirant. He didn't sweat in the interview.
Oh my! Imagine if he had started breaking out into a sweat as he was getting the point about sweating.
That would be brilliant.
So yeah, I think for my ones, I'm gonna have to basically echo your thoughts. But I'll give this just how big of a conspiracy it is. But it's a British royal family. Someone he's not one of them. It wasn't at the time he was doing it. Not a minor royal, but any stretch the imagination. So Duke of York, he was at one point, I think, second in line to the throne.
Yeah, and he had 10,000 men, and he marched them up top of the hill. He marched them down again.
And hopped on the Lolita Express. I don't think they'll be singing the Grand Old Duke of York in Spectacles much longer.
To be fair, I haven't heard that song in 10
No,
years.
I haven't.
Old school classic.
It's a banger, to be fair.
So yeah, I think it was overall 9.5 for the conspiracy. It's just basically got everything when you consider the wider implications. I think the shady dealings with Epstein had the potential to basically shed light on before his untimely death. Obviously all engineered by him. It's a massive organised crime sort of syndicate. Sexual pyramid scheme has been described. But on the believability, I mean, I've said anyone who doesn't believe it's got to be either trying to play serious devil's advocate, or it's just got their head screwed on in such a way they have to just go against everything that all of your better instincts and your judgment to disregard all of this information that's come out against him. As for also basically the fact that Andrew did it, I think it's not. You want to say maybe could be a slight benefit that you never know. He could have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you think, given how he's come across as quite arrogant in this BBC interview, plus all the actual hard evidence that he's been registered in the flight logs for this Epstein's Black Book, it's got to be a 9 on the believability. Helped Andrew to solicit sex from not underage, but young girls who were part of sex trafficking. But yeah, so basically, I'll throw this one now over to John, who's going to detail the big conspiracy, one of the biggest ones to come out of the whole Epstein saga, and that is his untimely death.
Thank you very much, Calum. So I'm going to be focusing on the very famous phrase, Epstein didn't kill himself. So what I'm going to be doing is just kind of talking briefly around some of the reasons why people seem to think that he didn't kill himself and maybe some of the motives behind it. So Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his jail cell aged 66 on the 10th of August 2019, which was the day before he was meant to go to trial and potentially testify, revealing numerous names to the court of all the people involved with him. His ring was thought to have involved over 1,000 elite people, all of which would have reason to want him dead to prevent him from talking, including famously Bill Clinton, who flew in Epstein's Lolita Express plane 26 times. Now, I won't go too deeply into some of the other names, just because that is part of our little game at the end of Conspiracy.
Yeah, on the subject of the Clintons briefly, I say the Clinton family, there's rumours they have had previous of bumping people off who have threatened them. So we say Hillary especially has been accused of several suicides with 2 bullets to the back of the head sort of arrangements.
Right, yeah, exactly. And there's quite a big movement and theory behind the whole Clinton body count thing where a lot of people think they're responsible for quite a lot of murders and things going on and cover-ups. So it's, interesting, but probably not surprising that they were involved quite heavily as well. Obviously, 26 flights on the plane that are in the books.
Those are beyond just a chance meeting or an unfortunate coincidence sort of thing.
I know. And he still claims that he was unaware of any of the wrongdoings of Epstein throughout that time.
God, even 26 holidays to American Virgin Islands is excessive.
I know. It's mad.
That's what he's obviously claiming.
I'm assuming, that is what he's claiming, but I'm not sure entirely. I don't know how else he could do it. So there obviously would have been serious benefits to Epstein of revealing these names in exchange for, at the very least, a more comfortable time in prison, because in all likelihood he probably wouldn't get released if found guilty, but by revealing names he could maybe shift it from like a supermax horrible cell to a bit more relaxed. And
a few days off of work.
Yeah, or just goes back to his 6 off, 1 on days.
6 days in the US Virgin Islands on his island.
So Jeffrey Epstein was put on suicide watch 2 weeks before his death after an alleged attempt to kill himself on the 23rd of July, where he was found unconscious in his cell with injuries to his neck. So this suicide watch involved more regular checks from the guards and constant surveillance to ensure that he couldn't attempt suicide again. However, he was only on suicide watch for less than a week before his death, and the footage of his alleged suicide attempt the first time has gone missing.
This is probably a pretty obvious, stupid question, but I'm assuming he had way more security than the average prisoner as well, so this suicide watch should have been very over the top.
Yeah, so there basically were 2 FBI cameras on his cell at all times, and then a jail camera on his cell with guards watching it at all times. But then every half an hour, 2 guards had to check him in the flesh at the cell as well.
Wow, and somehow, supposedly, he committed suicide.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So yeah, there was the first suicide attempt, but a lot of people think this was kind of fabricated to make the actual suicide look more realistic. Because like we say, there's no evidence of the first suicide attempt going on, and the footage has gone missing. I suppose you can say, well, it could have happened, and would we have footage anyway of it happening? I don't know, but people seem to think that's suspicious, and I'm kind of inclined to agree with them. And as we know, it's a bit of a common theme. Cameras seem to not be working at important moments. And on that note, on the day of his suicide, or day of his death, 2 FBI security cameras stationed directly outside of Epstein's cell were both broken in some capacity and were unable to film the event and catch a potential killer or filming his alleged suicide, thus leaving the question of his suicide unanswered in many's eyes. The first camera turned itself off, and the second one had all of its footage corrupted.
I'm sorry, but that's just got to be one of the most perfectly coincidental instances in any conspiracy theory ever mentioned. That's just perfect. I mean, FBI cameras really got to be meticulously regulated and checking them just to make sure they're working.
I don't know if you're going to touch on this, but I guess people could theorize that it was some kind of, top hacker that somehow managed to hack into the FBI system just because of whoever wants Epstein dead is powerful enough to, get these top hackers.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I suppose it's strange that the cameras both failed in different ways. That one of them turned itself off, which I suppose you say was a hacker, and then the other one, footage just got corrupted for what was down as an unspecified reason. So it just seems like clutching at straws for me. It's like as if someone in the planning room's gone, right, should we say they both turned off? It's like, no, it's too obvious. Say one of them turned off.
At least if both went off for the same reason, there's a bit more, viability. Oh, there's a little power cut in.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
It's just an incredibly localized EMP.
But yeah, on the night he died, guards were required to check on inmates, specifically Epstein, every 30 minutes. However, this did not happen. The 2 guards responsible for keeping an eye on Epstein the night he died have been charged with falsifying records and conspiracy after allegedly falling asleep and shopping online rather than checking on him and then lying about it in court. The logistics of the suicide are also very questionable, given Epstein was 6 feet tall and was hanging from a bunk bed that was no taller than 6 feet.
Can you just imagine, though, you're the 2 FBI guards looking on suicide watch for Epstein, and, you're just shopping on Amazon, minimize it, and the camera's back up, and you just see Jeffrey Epstein. You'd be absolutely shitting.
Exactly. You'd be like, okay, perfect, job's done. Right, let's get back to my online shopping.
But you corrupt the footage on.
So yeah, the bunk bed that he was found hanging from was no taller than 6 feet, which meant he had to raise his legs whilst hanging in order to make sure that he actually hung. This is unusual, given normally a stool or something is used and then kicked away, so that there isn't the option of putting your feet down. Potentially, this can be explained as him using what he had to hand, as he was unlikely to have a stool or light to attach a noose to. However, it's still just logistically be very difficult, especially because when you're hanging, your body kind of goes into panic mode, you go into survival mode, which is why people kick a chair under them, so they don't have the option of getting free. Whereas if he literally just put his feet down, he would have been all right. And I think...
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible self-control, Zen levels of self-control. To not put your feet down, to hold just the legs in like a flex position to stop them hitting the ground, which you just think is impossible given every single urge your body is fighting to alleviate the pressure on your neck, otherwise you're going to die.
Yeah, exactly. So photos showed the deep bloodied cut to his neck following the alleged hanging and a severed neck bone, along nooses that were made out of an orange bedsheet. One of them was looped through a bedpost in his cell. Now, the noose itself, according to the inquiry, was cut down with scissors, but the pictures show no signs of any incisions and the noose is still tied, as if it's been untangled and retied, and the noose doesn't match the marks around his neck. The noose made from the bedsheet is far thicker than the very thin, wire-like marks found on Epstein's neck. So suppose if you think of you hanging yourself with like a duvet cover or something like that, it's not going to give a very thin line around your neck. It's going to be quite spread out because it's obviously quite thick. So the marks don't really mark it. Yeah, exactly. It's odd. So other photos of the cell, show multiple bottles of prescription pills, electrical cords, and enough bedsheets for several inmates, despite Epstein not sharing a cell at the time of his death. the cord of his sleep apnea machine that was in his cell. So for those who don't know, sleep apnea is like a condition where you stop breathing at night when you're asleep, which he had apparently. But he had a machine in his room that he basically put a mask on and it gives you oxygen while you sleep. But the cord of that machine that was in his room is far more consistent with his injuries, which leads many to believe he was actually strangled with this cord, then hung with the bedsheet after his death to make it look like suicide.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems a much more plausible explanation. It's quite difficult to say hang yourself with a sleep apnea machine. They're quite cumbersome.
Yeah, I suppose the cord of that matches the wounds around his neck, and I suppose, the theory saying somebody broke in and wrapped that around his neck, started pulling, and then strangled him that way, which I'll come on to maybe a little bit more support for that theory now. So Jeffrey Epstein's brother refused to believe the official story that his brother killed himself and hired an examiner to do a second autopsy, which found broken bones in his neck far more consistent with a homicidal strangulation rather than a hanging. One of the broken bones in Epstein's neck was described as unheard of in a suicidal hanging by an expert. Former New York medical examiner Dr. Michael Barden said that the forensic evidence released so far, including autopsy, point much more to a murder and strangulation rather than a suicide and suicidal hanging. Autopsy photos show the 66-year-old's broken hyoid bone near his Adam's apple. Dr. Barden said that the paedophile's neck being broken in 3 places was unheard of in suicide. Over 1,000 jail-hanging suicides in the New York State prisons over the past 40-50 years, and no one has had these 3 fractures.
So if we're going to entertain the theory, it's almost a certainty that he was bumped off. You think that the people responsible would take meticulous care to make sure the injuries were consistent with hanging with the right implements available to Epstein?
Well, I don't think they would, just for the reason that a lot of people think that the autopsy was all bought and paid for, because the official autopsy, and the one that still stands, says that it was clearly a suicide. It was only when Epstein's brother refused to believe this and hired his own one, and some independent ones done by, I think, NBC and Fox News have also come back with the same conclusion as the independent one done by the brother, saying actually this looks far more like a murder than a suicide. But the official autopsy from the local justice system and the prison, they say it's a suicide. So I suppose you can say that result was bought by the people who had him murdered as a cover-up, and they didn't anticipate second autopsies being done privately. So in the interview with Fox News, just to reiterate, he said that the evidence points towards homicide rather than suicide. Those 3 fractures are extremely unusual in suicide hangings and would only really occur had somebody tied a noose to the top of a building, jumped out of the window and fallen 5 stories, because it would break your neck so viciously, rather than fallen at most a couple of inches from his bed. Hanging does not cause broken bones, homicide does. Those are Barden's final words on the matter. Epstein also had bruising on both wrists, hemorrhaging in his left shoulder, and a graze on his left arm, as if having been in some sort of fight or putting up a struggle. The autopsy observed on behalf of Epstein's family said that staff broke prison protocol by removing his body before it could be photographed in situ and by rushing him to the hospital after he was found dead. So basically, when normally there's a death in a prison, you leave everything as it is. It's the same with a normal crime scene as well. Take photographs before you touch or move anything, and then you get on with your investigation. Whereas with Epstein, the first thing they did was allegedly cut him straight down, didn't take any pictures, and then it was only a few days after that any pictures were taken of the room, by which time, they weren't really going to tell you anything. It's certainly probable that the guards were paid off to act ignorantly, and then perhaps an inmate was paid to commit the murder and make it look like suicide, especially given the sheer amount of powerful and wealthy individuals that would benefit from Epstein failing to testify and unveiling the thousands of names. Interestingly as well, because his death was ruled a suicide, all criminal charges associated with Epstein were dropped, which included any investigations into his sex trafficking ring with him specifically, which has potentially spared over 1,000 names linked to him. So that kind of concludes it. What do you reckon, guys?
I think that final point there is quite shocking, really, you think. So it was the perfect get out of jail card if you don't want to answer for your crimes. They've all charges dropped upon your suicide. I just can't
exactly.
get my head around that. Like, surely there is enough grounds to continue investigating given the magnitude of his reported operation at the time.
And apparently, because obviously Maxwell has now come under fire for it as well, the only reason she's being investigated is because she was already being investigated alongside Epstein. So apparently they already had plans to bring her in, but they're basically saying they're not going to look any deeper into Epstein's part of the case now that he's killed himself. Behind the guise of, well, he's dead, what can we do? There's no point in investigating it now, whereas in actual fact, you could uncover a hell of a lot more by carrying on investigating it.
Yeah, so it was like peace of mind to the victims' families as well and stuff like that. You just think, just for say, yes, they're telling the truth in the end, and Epstein really is this criminal mastermind with his sex trafficking organisation.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I guess if Maxwell does get charged, I guess that will confirm it anyway.
One thing that's just dawned on me about the Maxwell thing, actually, is the most likely scenario, logically, that she's just going to go into court and just put everything on Epstein, blame everything on him because he can't answer for himself, and just kind of clear everyone else's name and say, oh, he was the only one recruiting, he's the only one doing anything.
I guess it could be a mix of that and just point blank denying it, really. She's always denied it in the past. You know, when Epstein did get charged, she has come out and said, look, I've got nothing to do with it. So maybe she is willing to pin it totally on him. I guess even the victims in the court will still have evidence stacked up against her too, and will want revenge on her in some way.
Probably just say she was coerced, wasn't she, like forced to do it?
Yeah, I do think that is her only defence, isn't it?
Depends what advice her legal team ends up giving her, or what sort of position they decide to take.
Do we know if she's using like the same lawyers as Epstein? You know, Alan Dershowitz, famous.
No, I don't know.
Because I really don't know if she's trying to totally distance herself now from the whole Epstein thing. Won't use his lawyers or ever really use his estate and money again.
Because she hasn't even been photographed yet, so it's all been kept very quiet at the moment. The whole investigation with Maxwell.
Funnily enough, I did stumble upon a site that tells you names of prisoners, inmates in New Hampshire. Typed in her name and nothing came up at all. Obviously, I think it's a lot more secretive, so I really doubt it'd be that publicly available. But according to Reddit, if you believe it, some guy did actually ring all the prisoners in New Hampshire and found out that she's staying at one of them. But that's Reddit, so who knows how true.
Take that with a grain of salt, I think.
More than a grain. Pacific Ocean's worth. So yeah, we have some ratings from you two on that one.
You're doing very well at this stage now to find anyone who genuinely believes that Epstein committed suicide, so it's outside of maybe the circle he could have potentially implicated. It's one of the most widely believed conspiracy theories in recent times. So much so it's just become a meme now. Right? I'll just need a reminder that Epstein didn't kill himself.
Even Ricky Gervais said it in his Golden Globes opening monologue. So the added weight of saying it directly to the elites is a real kind of...
that definitely had some people squirming. I see this whole piece during that. That was quite fun to watch.
I mean, it did as well. They weren't laughing. It was a whole crowd of, they were not happy with it.
Oh yeah, I think Tom Hanks was certainly, remember he was some concerned faces. Like, got some face for absolute pictures.
Anyone laughing was Adam Driver.
Oh, he was creasy. That was a great. I remember there was one person who was absolutely creasing at it, which means he's done nothing wrong.
I'm sure there'd be many sweating in the audience, apart from Prince Andrew if he was there. But yeah, actually, I saw something from Donald Trump Jr. on Instagram where he put hashtag Epstein didn't kill himself. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah,
he's actually giving his dad his best mate.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's the news today of Donald Trump's niece coming out to speak out against Donald Trump and how much of an evil man he is. So who knows in that family?
It seems like everyone's out for themselves at times. I mean, the whole Trump side of it, especially the younger ones, like to be going with this whole counterculture and edgy element to political campaigning. I think if that does include Epstein didn't kill himself, just forgetting the wider implications of the fact that his dad's name was on multiple contact numbers in the Black Book, and it's also circled as well, so implying extra importance. But I suppose, for believability, is it the fact that Epstein didn't kill himself, or in fact believing that he did?
So a 10 out of 10 would be firm belief that he was murdered.
Right. Well, in that case, I'm going to go for a 9 out of 10 on this one. Just you never know. He could have been some sort of contortionist that was able to manipulate his body in such a way to prevent his legs touching the ground, and also caused such unique injuries to his neck, given the implements at hand.
And he didn't fancy testifying.
Didn't fancy testifying, no. He used some advanced mind powers to corrupt both the cameras, train the security guards into doing some Amazon shopping and falling asleep on the job, just to make sure to protect his friends in high places. But the conspiracy theories and all, as with anything connected to Epstein, his gigantic network, solid 9 out of 10 again.
Very nice, thank you. Luke, what do you reckon?
So yeah, kind of following on from Calum, it's a great conspiracy. It's super interesting, and I mean, everything just seems so fishy regarding the whole Epstein case. But even before the suicide, everything just seems so fishy, and then the suicide just made it even more. Yeah, just some of the names that it could implicate, and the fact that he's no longer alive to be able to implicate them. I mean, obviously, huge conspiracy is going to come out of that, and just the way it will happen. So I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10 for a conspiracy. Yeah, so for believability, just given the sheer scale of the case, you really think the FBI would put their best people on suicide watch watching him, not people, are going to go on Amazon and start doing some shopping. And, you think they'd have like the British Guard outside Buckingham Palace, that kind of level of concentration where they're just focused on the screen non-stop for 8 hours for their shift. I mean, you just simply can't not look at them. And the fact 2 cameras went out for different reasons as well is just ridiculous. And then all the other inconsistencies you mentioned with the autopsy. I mean, it's hard to really believe this, even though we're told to believe it. It's just because your brain just says, nah, it's not true. He clearly was murdered. So I'm going to give it high as well. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10.
One more thing. It's the whole idea of the non-suicide watch. The first place you mentioned seems very suspect.
Probably in all likelihood, that first suicide attempt was either a failed assassination attempt or just a cover-up and nothing ever happened, just so it adds a bit more weight to it.
Can you imagine now if Maxwell commits suicide?
I just think they wouldn't dare, as much as they'd like.
Imagine if she actually did commit suicide.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be so much as a smoking gun, rather than a whole smoking army.
Yeah.
People have already printed T-shirts saying Maxwell didn't kill herself. So everyone's preempting it.
I mean, who's buying that? I mean, respectfully, that committed conspiracy theories about
I've got one on now, mate.
Co-Conspirators merch.
Just go wear it outside Buckingham Palace.
But yeah, I'll quickly give my rating. I think it's very similar to you guys. I think overall conspiracy theory, that this, hugely powerful man, very well connected in very dodgy ways with hugely famous people, is about to testify, and then the day before his court date, he is found dead in very suspicious circumstances. I think doesn't really get much bigger, so I'm going to go 9.5 out of 10 for the overall conspiracy. And then believability, again, as we've touched on, like cameras not working, the wounds not matching up, it being a unique injuries to have during a hanging. All these things make me think, I'm very, very confident that he didn't kill himself. So I'm thinking 9.5 out of 10 for believability.
Ooh, that's high.
It's high, unlike his bunk bed.
Oh.
So over to Calum now for everyone's favourite part of the week, which is our game of conspiracy.
Right, thanks for that, John. Before we jump into this week's edition of Conspiracy, I took some time to go back through our previous episodes and count up the scores. From humble beginnings and some very obvious conspiracies, it's evolved into a formidable challenge with some great theories researched and made up by my co-hosts. From our previous 10 episodes, there have been 7 games where conspiracy has won, which is where neither co-host has been able to identify the false conspiracy, and only 3 where both co-hosts correctly identified the hoax. As for the hosts, Luke is out in front with a record of 5 for 2, meaning that he's correctly guessed the conspiracy in 5 out of 7 episodes. John has an even record of 3 for 3, but it's worth noting that he has hosted 4 episodes compared to mine and Luke's 3. Last episode, I broke a 3-podcast losing streak to slightly polish up my record of 4 correct guesses to 3 incorrect ones. So, as always, it's all to play for.
Happy to be above the leaderboard.
Yeah, doing really well. So I was quite surprised, actually. I thought I'd be doing okay, but I realised my massive losing streak just completely derailed my...
I remember you starting very well and then getting very cocky and being swiftly brought back down to earth.
That is very true, yes.
Somewhere around the meeting landings one, somewhat ironically.
Yeah, there was a sort of point where it took a big turn to we got really good at making up conspiracy theories. And it was an easy ride the first few episodes. But yeah, now let's get into the game. This week, I'm going to experiment with a slight change of format from the game we all know and love, designed around Jeffrey Epstein's infamous Little Black Book. We've already mentioned 3 of the most high-profile names, that being the Trumps, the Clintons, and Prince Andrew, but the list goes a lot further than just those 3. Instead of presenting 3 conspiracies, one of which that I have made up, I'm going to give you 3 high-profile names, 2 of whom have their contact details listed in Epstein's book, and 1 that I have thrown in to spice things up. As with conspiracy, it's your job to guess the, shall we say, innocent celebrity. I've got 5 rounds prepared, so let's try to keep things relatively quick-fire, and without further ado, let's open the book. Right, round number 1, this is actors. So we have Alec Baldwin, star of The Hunt for Red October, The Departed, and Beetlejuice, to name a few. Meryl Streep, star of Mamma Mia, Devil Wears Prada, and The Post, amongst countless others.
No way.
And Chris Tucker, star of the Rush Hour series.
You just run them quick, who we think straight away?
You can have a little bit of thought, but yeah, that's not. I don't have any further.
I think I know my answer, but Luke can go first.
I mean, I'll dive into this one. It is so bait, but I mean, I have to go for Meryl Streep on this one. Alec Baldwin's always struck me as an odd guy, so Meryl Streep's my answer.
Right, I think I've heard Alec Baldwin mentioned in regards to this, and I say this every week and I'm always wrong, but I'm also convinced I've heard Meryl Streep mentioned, so I'm going to say Chris Tucker.
Right, well, for round 1, it is a win for conspiracy. And Luke is correct. Meryl Streep was the false one.
God's sake.
Yes.
I think Meryl Streep has
Played
been.
yourself.
Yeah, she's been mentioned as being very chummy with Harvey Weinstein, and also gave a standing ovation to Roman Polanski at one award ceremony. He's a known paedophile, but not enough to get her in Epstein's book, unfortunately. I say unfortunately for the game and for John's chance in the game. Right, round number 2. This time it's broadcasters. So we have Chris Evans, star of TV and radio in England. Barbara Walters, American broadcast journalist, author, and television personality, and Howard Stern, American radio and TV personality.
I'll jump straight in again. I'm going to have to go for Chris Evans there. I mean, you never know based on their TV personality, but to me, it just doesn't seem like that kind of guy.
I agree on that one. The only thing maybe casting doubt on it is Chris Evans is like insanely wealthy. And I know he's been famous for a long time, but he's only been like doing TV shows and radio shows, but he drops like 30-40 million on cars and stuff, which maybe makes me think he's got a bit of a dodgier life than we're maybe led to believe. But I think I've got to go Chris Evans on that one.
Well, I mean, a garage full of Ferraris is not enough to get you out of Jeffrey Epstein's black book. Chris Evans is in fact in there, and it was
No way.
It was Howard Stern who was the red herring. Surprisingly,
God, that was a red herring, yeah.
Maybe been involved with some slightly questionable activities in the past, part of his rather edgy radio station. And interesting enough, Barbara Walters, if you remember the Corey Feldman case, there's an interview of her where she's almost discouraging Corey from telling his story, saying that you could destroy an entire industry. So I guess she knows a lot more than she'd like to let on.
Yeah, Corey Feldman's another one who's come out numerous times saying, paedophilia was rife in Hollywood and that he was abused when he was a young actor, and he's always threatening to come out and expose names, but he's exposed a few, but he's still a bit too scared to, I think he said, which is, I suppose, fair enough in one sense, because he clearly fears for his life, but then in another sense, it's kind of for the greater good, isn't it, getting out there?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of pressure. It's a very big decision, but you'd like to see, hopefully someday he just comes through just to, say, spill the beans.
Interestingly as well, he's always defended Michael Jackson. He said of all the celebrities, the people that abused him, Michael Jackson never did, and was actually the opposite.
I think that's a hill you like to die on, isn't it? That Michael Jackson's not a paedophile.
Well, it's where I am with it at the moment. We can never know. Maybe we could do an episode on it.
Have to talk about Michael Jackson, that's for sure. So yeah, I'll keep that one in mind. Ready for round 3?
Born ready.
Right, let's go. This one's business tycoons. So we have Richard Branson.
Is he the founder of Pickle?
Yeah. Richard Branson, owner of the Virgin Group, including airlines, media, and health businesses, amongst others. Net worth of approximately $4.1 billion. Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, American conglomerate that owns Geico, Duracell, Fruits and Loom, amongst others, with a net worth of a staggering $70 billion. And David Rockefeller, the recently deceased 2017 American banker who served as chairman and chief executive of Chase Manhattan Corporation, who had a net worth of $2.9 billion before his death.
Oh, this one's a tough one.
It is.
Something shouted out at me that Richard Branson would just do it himself rather than get involved with Epstein. But for some reason, I'm leaning towards Warren Buffett. I'm just going to go for Warren Buffett.
Just for the sake of disagreeing, I'm going to go for Rockefeller, just because they're so notorious with conspiracy theories, along with like the Rothschilds. I think maybe you could have made that one up. So I'll go with Rockefeller.
Right. Well, one of you is correct, and again, in the ones we had a little bit of a disagreement, it's Luke who's coming out victorious. He has correctly identified that Warren Buffett was not in this little black book. But we say with John mentioned the Rockefellers, I mean, Twin Towers, say no more with those ones. Yeah, I think there was also Rothschilds mentioned. I'm not sure how high up the chain they go, but there was several listed. I mean, Richard Branson's always been something dodgy about him, I think.
I mean, he also has an island in the British Virgin Islands. Or is it the American Virgin Islands? I don't know how close they are, but
might not need to be island hopping with the Lolita Express. Right, round number 4. This time it's got some musicians. So we have Paul McCartney, singer, songwriter, and vocalist and bassist for the Beatles. Mick Jagger, lead singer of the Rolling Stones, and Courtney Love, widow of Kurt Cobain, lead singer of Hole.
I mean, I thought I would have heard these names mentioned more. They're such big names that if they're in his book, I thought I would have literally heard them. But all I literally knew was Trump, brilliant, Prince Andrew. I'm surprised this hasn't come out more. This is a tough one. Obviously, Mick Jagger likes his women. But I just feel like Paul McCartney's innocent. for some reason. I have no idea why. So I'm going to go for Paul McCartney.
I mean, again, this is going to bite me on the arse, but I am like 100% sure that I've heard and even seen Mick Jagger's name in there. So I'm ruling him out. And then Courtney Love, I mean, she's had so many conspiracies associated with her. Kind of just want to beat Luke on one. So even though I kind of think the answer is Paul McCartney, I'm just going to go with Courtney Love for the sake of it. So I reckon it's her.
Okay, well, yet again, John's decided to beat Luke has been his undoing. Should have gone with your head, not your heart.
Yeah, fair enough. I did think that was the case.
And very interesting, this one, Courtney Love's name is also one of the ones that is circled, say, along with Donald Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell. So who knows how implicated she could be as if Maxwell squeals.
Could have been on the recruitment drive.
Yeah, also there's plenty of conspiracies about her. Enough from we got her and Kurt Cobain. So we do a whole musicians episode at some point. Michael Jackson. Okay, well, that's two. Just need one more. And round number 5. We all love to hate them. It's politicians. So for this one, we have Vince Cable, British politician, leader of the Liberal Democrats. Henry Kissinger, American politician, diplomat, and US Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. And Peter Mandelson, Labour politician, president of international think tank Policy Network, and chairman of strategic advisory firm Global Counsel.
God, Vince Cable has always struck me as a weird guy, but isn't there something dodgy about Peter Mandelson as well? Some kind of inquiry or something? Or is that just something that he spearheaded? Yeah, but I'm not sure. I feel like Henry Kissinger is a bit obscure for Calum to have made up and just plucked out of thin air. I think he would have made it one of the British ones for some reason, so I'm going to go for Peter Mandelson.
Well, Kissinger's very heavily involved with a lot of the theories around like 9/11 stuff.
Yeah, David Icke likes to name drop him a lot.
Very much does. So that's leading me to think he's probably in it. I think I might go for... I mean, I may as well make it a theme and disagree, but I'm going to go with Vince Cable.
Well, it's paid off this time, John. You've got one.
Yeah, beauty.
Vince Cable. I just don't think he's big time enough to be involved with Epstein. I was quite struggling on this one, finding a politician who was high profile enough, also active around the time. It's like 2004, 2005, so a little bit before our times, really. And I think you are right. There's been always photographs of Peter Mandelson and Epstein released to the press, Luke, on that one. He's had some, maybe say, dodgy dealings in the past. And as John mentioned with Kissinger, he's just conspiracy central. Not many people who seem in the conspiracy world to have good things to say about him. So I thought I was throwing him in there might be a bit of a potential red herring. You think, oh, is it yet another conspiracy? Maybe but yeah. So I think that was quite a fun little take on the conspiracy game. And I think I surprised myself there. I thought you'd be able to spot some of my red herrings quite easily there, but some of them managed to fool you, so I'm pleased with that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Have you got, no worries if not, but have you got like any more names you could just throw out of people that were in there? Maybe any that are surprising?
A couple of surprising ones. So the model Naomi Campbell has some contact details listed in there.
Oh, okay. No,
Lord of Voldemort himself, Ralph Fiennes. His name
what? I like Ray Fiennes.
Okay. As I mentioned, like the Rothschild, there's a lot of different members of the Trump family. There's just a lot of the lawyers as well he's been associated with, so names you might not know unless you're into your law, I guess, but all the ones Epstein's had defend him in the past, they're all in there. Got a few crown princes and members of royalty of different places. Like, there's just all sorts of names in there, so I do recommend having to flick through, seeing how many names you actually recognise.
I just had a quick look then, a very surprising one I've just found. John Cleese.
Yeah, clicked on it. I did a bit of background to see if it actually was him. I saw a Reddit post saying, no, it's not. But then it turns out, yes, that's him and his wife, both listed in the same contact detail.
Oh dear. So yeah, thanks for that, Calum. Really enjoyed that game of conspiracy. Nice little twist on the original.
Yeah, it's just quite difficult, I imagine, to make up conspiracy theories about Epstein. The things are already out there on the public record for everyone to see, but part of this podcast, a bit of fun. So I think we'll just wrap this one up. It's certainly a developing case, that's for sure, with Maxwell. It remains to be seen how much she'll talk, if she'll even get a chance to talk. But Epstein's untimely death has definitely proven there's some nefarious dealings going on, trying to keep him silent, if we do believe the very plausible argument that he didn't kill himself and he wasn't ready to talk. So yeah, it remains to be seen if we have a follow-up episode on this one, hopefully, given some of the names that could come out of it. It could be very shocking for the world of celebrity and the so-called elites. Very sweating. All except Andrew, who's feeling very calm and composed at the moment. But yeah, so until the next time, I will bid you farewell.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
And keep challenging the status quo.